Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Jessica Ward King, also known as the StigmaCrusher, and here in this channel we deal with issues of mental health and mental illness from my twin perspectives as a person with lived experience of bipolar 2 disorder, as well as a person with a PhD in experimental psychology. Sound like your jam? You are more than welcome here. Please remember to subscribe, and if you want to be notified each and every week when I post, hit that notifications bell as well. Like if you like this kind of content, and share widely. We'd love to get more people involved in our community. So with that, let's start stigma crushing for this week. So guys, you have got a rough-looking stigma crusher this week, but it's all for a good cause. Last night, I was a speaker and presenter at the Sing for Mental Health 2 event, raising money for mental health peer support and entrepreneurial mental health awareness campaigns. And so what you're going to see today is actually the talk that I gave last night to the crowd there. And it was a late night, which is why you've got a pretty rough look in me today. But I do invite you to have a listen to that. And I will see you in my video next week. Here it comes.
So up next is Jessica Ward King, and she's tall, so why am I bending over like this?
Yeah, that's good. I'm tall and I'm in heels.
My heels.
You left your heels at home, okay. I'll lend you mine later.
All right, Jessica Ward King, people.
Don't clap yet, you don't know what I'm gonna say, guys. So my name is Jessica Ward King, and I am a mother of a beautiful baby boy. His name is Carter, and he's 9 years old. I'm also the proud owner of a hideous mental illness. Its name is bipolar, and it's type 2. I'm highly educated, having as well a PhD, nice to hear it. And I'm also highly medicated, so if I could get this down to my stomach, you might hear me rattle. I have received dozens of awards for my work and dozens of electroshocks to my brain. I am successful in all those ways that matter. Also a public servant, also doing something not entirely related to my PhD. We'll talk later. But I have a wife who adores me, a comfortable home, a job that I do love very much, and I am successful. And yet I live with a mental illness that's very serious, very disabling, and for which I have had numerous treatments, such as experimental brain surgery. In fact, I just recently spent a month taking ketamine, yes, the horse tranquilizer, under the watchful gaze of my psychiatrist to try to turn the tides of my depression. And you know, of all of the things I've ever done for my mental illness, the worst thing I have ever experienced is not the rock bottom. It was the stigma that hit me after that rock bottom. Because it's the stigma that makes us all believe that people with mental illness are lazy, ugly, stupid, sucks on the system, who can't be, you can't bet on them being there, they're not reliable. You certainly don't want to invest your money in them or your time or your effort because they're probably pretty flaky. That's what stigma tells us about mental illness. It tells us that if we are going to live successfully with it, we have to be perfect. That there is no room for failure. There's no room for vulnerability. You have to be perfect. And ideally, tell no one that you're struggling. That is how I lived most of my life. I didn't even want to admit to myself that I was struggling. And you know, I have a PhD in psychology, so I certainly knew enough. I knew that the symptoms I've been struggling with since I was 15 years old were symptoms of depression and anxiety, and that when the hypomania came, I knew that bipolar was the one to blame for it, and yet I insisted I did not have mental illness. I insisted that I was too good and successful for that. Until I found myself sitting in the psychiatric hospital looking at the sink and mirror combo that would nearly be my undoing. You see, in the psychiatric hospital, the sink is not a bowl or even a pasta bowl like you might expect. It's more like a dinner plate, because of course, a person can drown in less than 2 inches of water. The mirror is not a beautiful, shiny, glass-covered mirror. Instead, it's just mildly polished metal, because of course you could break it and use it to harm yourself or others. And the tap and faucet is not your, standard turn it on and out comes the water. Instead, it's buttons in the wall and a little hole that just spits out little bits of water, enough for you to maybe wash your hands. Because of course you could use a faucet to harm yourself or others. And I learned while I was in the hospital that first time that there's an entire industry of people. There's designers, there are engineers, there are the marketing folks, the folks that sell them, the folks that come to the hospital and install them. An entire industry of people creating things just so that I, a psychiatric hospital patient, couldn't harm myself or others. And that's when I realized I had mental illness, and that's when I started applying my stigma of the world directly to myself. We associate people with mental illness with that guy that's sitting on the cold hard ground muttering to himself. You cross the street immediately when you see him with your child hard in your hand, because you never know when he's just gonna snap. It's stigma that tells us that the woman that drives her car into a group of people standing on the side of the road, or the man that crashes his jetliner into the side of the Swiss Alps, has to have mental illness, right? It couldn't just be that they're violent. It couldn't just be that they're extremists. They have to have mental illness. That's what I started applying to myself, that I had to have mental illness, and therefore that I was unreliable, that I was crazy, that I was insane, that I couldn't be counted on, and that no one could find out, because then they'd know I was an imposter. I'm a lot like Rachel. I have really high functioning bipolar disorder. I've been struggling in this depressive episode for the last 21 months or so. Count back, you'll figure out what the trigger was this time, right? During the pandemic, there has been a huge boon in mental health discussions. We're all now, we're coloring and we're breathing and we're meditating and we're journaling, and everybody's talking about mental health and improving your mental health, and we're putting money into systems, into online availability of counselors, of therapists, of our EAP programs, all to bolster our mental health. And what's been happening with mental illness? Not a whole lot. Not a whole lot at all. In fact, people with mental illness still are hiding it. They're still believing that they have to be perfect to compensate for it. And you know what I learned? I've been at this for 23 years of my 38 years on this planet, and I spent probably 20 of them believing I had to be perfect, but you know what? You don't. You can still be remarkable. You can be incredible, you can be successful, and still be vulnerable, and still make epic mistakes, and be awesome. That's what I've learned. I can be remarkable and have mental illness and still be able to be vulnerable like this in front of you. I have been resisting making the jump to precarity, as Rachel was saying, because I have a cushy job with benefits and all those things we laugh about, oh yes. And I am resisting that jump, for one thing, because I am struggling with my mental health, and I am so severely struggling with mental illness. In fact, it looks like, as I mentioned, I've been on ketamine for the past month. Ketamine. What public servant can stand here and say I've been taking ketamine? And yet it didn't help. My next port of call is probably electroconvulsive therapy or shock therapy again. No, I'm not as ugly as Jack Nicholson in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, okay? But that seems to be where I'm going. My mental illness is really taking me down. And yet if my hair's curled, my makeup's on, I look good, I'm smiling. This is my armor against the world. I'm dying on the inside, but I can stand here in front of you today and be funny, even. Yeah, that's right. And if you think that you don't know anyone with mental illness, us are struggling right now. So if you have 3 friends and your 3 friends look okay, I don't know what to tell you about you, but if you have even 100 friends on Facebook, 25 of them are struggling with their mental health right now. And the best thing we can do is not our legislation. That's helpful. You can't discriminate against people with mental illness, at least, not on paper. We can educate. That's what things like, Bell Let's Talk or all of our, therapy commercials and so on will tell us. But the best thing you can do is be contact to other people. Be a peer. Because you may not struggle with mental illness, but you have mental health. We all have mental health. And if you can sit down with someone and be real and be vulnerable about things that are scaring you, things that are worrying you, things that you're not sure about, they might find that they can be open with you about their mental illness, that they can come out of that closet just a little bit, realize they don't have to be perfect. You could save a life that way. I know that mine has been saved that way. So tonight is about the party, for sure, the food, the drink, the people at your table, but it's also about being vulnerable with one another, not being perfect, and that being okay. If you leave here with nothing tonight other than prizes and a full belly and a nice Uber home, if you leave here with nothing else, leave here knowing that you can be remarkable and still fail epically. Thank you.
Stigma Crusher.